Hi, everyone. We're the Wellness Podcast. We're a student-led podcast. We're going to dig into some different pathways to well-being this evening. I'm Izzy, your host. I'm honored that anyone who's listening or joining us is joining us. Today, me and my classmates and peers are going to be discussing the positive impacts of cognitive-based therapy, CBT for short, nutrition and sleep, and mindfulness and gratitude. Very proud to have had the experience of working with this very hardworking group, and I'm very excited for them to share their experiences with these things with you all. Before we begin, though, I just want to talk a little bit about the timely nature of the teachings of positive psychology and what they've meant to me this semester. At the beginning of it, my cousin Callan, who is one of my best friends in the world, left this earth far too soon at the young age of 21. I was heavily impacted by this and began to deal with some problems regarding my well-being in a way I never had to do before. And I had almost no tools for dealing with it, so I dove into doing work in this class. And I'm proud to say that I use each of the topics we'll talk about today in order to begin the healing process. I used mindfulness and gratitude to give thanks from a place in this world, nutrition and sleep to remember the importance of self-care, and the practice of CBT to examine my coping behaviors and analyze them to see what they were really doing. Through it all, I can honestly say I better myself both internally and externally, and for that, I'm really grateful. Now that the heavy stuff's out of the way, let's get into our presenters for the day. Saiti will be talking about sleep and nutrition. Caroline will be talking about mindfulness and gratitude. And Laura is going to be discussing CBT. So first we can get into Saiti's presentation on sleep and nutrition.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm very excited to talk to you about sleep and nutrition today. It's something that's very important to me. So let's begin. The impact of sleep and nutrition on student well-being is absolutely crucial and oftentimes overlooked by most students. And speaking from personal experience, I know how hard it is to get 8 hours of sleep as a college student, especially during finals week, which we're all in right now. However, the effects of sleep deprivation is significant on performance and also cognitive function. Studies have shown that not only does your mood deteriorate when you're sleep deprived, which affects the quality of your work, but also it decreases your attention span and the time it takes to make judgments. Also, another important part is nutrition. Eating adequate and routine meals is also very important to good mental and physical well-being. Food is more than just nourishment for the body. It's also nourishment for the brain. And when students or other people have depleted glucose levels, their willpower is also depleted. This means that students don't have the mental strength to dedicate to school and other aspects of their life and often receive lackluster results. One important way that students can ensure that they're receiving adequate amounts of sleep and food is by tracking it daily. So this was an exercise that we did in our Signs of Happiness class. We worked on a journal throughout the week, which we were asked to continue for later to see better results. But it's important to realize that each student has different baselines. So in tandem of tracking how much sleep and food they're getting, students should also know their mood that day and if it fluctuates, about how much sleep and food they get. This exercise helped me recognize patterns in my own schedule and especially help me improve my sleep habits, which I think we can all relate to a little bit, especially the transition from college, from high school. And it also made me realize that sleep and nutrition are necessary to practice other aspects of well-being, which will be discussed in the remainder of this podcast by Laura and Caroline. And it is crucial that these basic needs are met so that they can students can reach their highest potential and practice good mental well-being.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Just a couple of follow-up questions. So for class, we read a study involving an experiment where volunteers were without sleep for 53 hours. From the study, it was concluded that sleep deprivation could lead to permissiveness or tolerance for judging difficult courses of actions as appropriate, no matter the influence of caffeine or not. I'm certainly a heavy caffeine user. So, how does this apply to college students and to your general experience?
Yeah, of course. I think sleep deprivation in general, one thing that I've noticed is just when you don't get a lot of sleep, you're cranky. And no matter what your, career is, what you have to do in the morning, when you're not in a good mood, the results that you're going to get are just not as good. And as students, it's very important that, our grades are very important to us, our friendships are very important to us, and, our relationships. And I think that's also something that I wanted to mention. Like, this a big part of well-being, especially as a college student, is maintaining relationships. And when you are able to get adequate sleep and food, not only are you doing well in school as a student, but you're also doing well as a student in life. Just having good relationships is extremely important to your mental well-being. So that is something that I've noticed, especially when I'm sleeping better, I'm in a better mood. And then, it lets me get my work done more quickly, more efficiently, lets me have time to then prioritize my relationships, which is just a cycle that builds upon it. And it's a good habit to have.
Thank you. And just kind of chaining off that, I guess, what are some advice you can give for like good practices for sleeping as a college student? And a funny, a preconceived thought that some people might have, and I've certainly had this one, is that it's possible to train yourself to need less sleep. I lived on this last semester. Is that possible at all? And if not, what are some good practices for college students to improve their sleep?
Yeah, I think a big, I guess something that's overlooked often is sleep hygiene. And I can tell you specifically just from living in the dorms, like it's really hard to have sleep hygiene because you don't have a lot of furniture in your room to kind of, I guess, separate, where you're sleeping versus where you're living. It's all kind of in one space. But something that I've practiced is just you should only use your bed when you're sleeping. And I think that's really important because it helps you go to bed easier. Also, sleeping less, I think, can be countered by sleeping well. I think that can be achieved by one, putting your phones away, any electronic devices earlier in the night, so not exposing yourself to any sort of electronics, and trying to get relaxed by either reading a book or journaling or something of that sort. And also just having a routine, like trying to wake up every single day at the same time, even though on the weekends we like to sleep in a little bit more. So but trying to have a routine schedule would be really helpful for students.
Perfect. And just kind of training off that as well. Uh, for Science of Happiness class, we did a little experiment with sleep and we reflected on it. How was your experience with our class exercise dealing with sleep? And what, if anything, did you learn?
Yeah, for me, I think it was definitely surprising because I mean, it was also during a really rough week for me, especially during school. I had a lot of tests going on. I believe it was close to Halloween week. So I definitely noticed patterns where I was like sleeping in the beginning. I was like really dedicating myself to the exercise. And then obviously I started falling off a little bit towards the end of the week, which also is important to take into account when, dealing with all sorts of um when dealing with well-being. And all these exercises that we're going to talk about is just being kind to yourself. It's not always going to be perfect. It's a process. So taking time, even though like we practiced a lot of this stuff for the week and we wrote reflections about it, I think it's important, like patience definitely, to make it into a habit. So that's something that I dealt with. I'm still working on trying to get those 8 hours of sleep if I can, and trying to just practice sleep hygiene. Same thing with meals. I think that's also something that's often overlooked, like trying to get 3 meals a day, especially breakfast. Very important. It's something that I still skip. So yeah, definitely trying to practice what you preach. So yeah.
All right. Thank you, Saiti. That was awesome. All right. Now we're going to move on to our second topic presentation on mindfulness and gratitude and its impact on well-being. And that'll be Caroline.
Hi. So, throughout the semester, the aim of the class was to explore how we can experience well being to its full extent. And after learning all of the different skills and ideas about increasing our happiness, I found that mindfulness and gratitude was the most effective ways to improve my well being. And so, mindfulness is the act of being present in the experience of engagement versus flow. So, mindfulness is a rule and routine guided, and it's about being sensitive to context and perspective. And mindfulness and positive emotions are actually connected because with increased mindfulness, we can have increased positive emotions. So, being mindful has countless benefits, such as increasing productivity, memory, attention, leadership, charisma, innovation, learning, self esteem, positive effect. The benefits really are endless, relationship satisfaction, vision, hearing, weight loss, longevity. And gratitude is the act of being grateful and having appreciation. And so together, these two concepts work together because in order to appreciate something, you have to be in the moment, and also known as being mindful. So using mindfulness and gratitude together can help you see and appreciate all of the good in your life, which obviously would increase your happiness. And specifically, two important positive psychologists that we've learned about, Peterson and Seligman, found that people who practice gratitude activities, such as keeping a gratitude journal, had fewer negative physical symptoms and were more optimistic about the upcoming week. They were also more agreeable, more extroverted, and more open to experiences. So mindfulness can help you realize what you want to change in order to increase your happiness.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I guess, yeah, just the same thing, a couple of discussion questions. You mentioned in your work, and obviously we've gone over a lot in class, the work of Peterson and Seligman on the work of positive psychology. Through their work on mindfulness, they developed 6 core values: courage, justice, humanity, temperance, transcendence, and wisdom. Which one of these to you is the most important in the context of mindfulness?
So this is a really good question. I think the most important value for me, in the context of mindfulness would be courage. I think a lot of people like lack courage because they're worried about the consequences of a situation rather than really being present in a situation. And I know, like, for me, the anxiety of an outcome would turn me into a coward. But I think if we really like practice mindfulness and we can engage in the activity we're doing, we can build our courage. And so I know, like, I often get overwhelmed easily, especially if I have a busy week. I'll get overwhelmed because I'll think about like what happens if I don't get everything done or if I fail at getting something done. But I really want to practice like going into my week with courage. And when when I get nervous or like anxiety consumes me, if I can practice being mindful through meditation, I can go into my week like with more courage and just make a more organized plan about tackling activities instead of letting them consume me.
Thank you so much. And going off that and the work we've done with Seligman, he developed a theory called the theory of learned helplessness. Just talk a little bit about that and what that means to you.
So Seligman's theory on learned helplessness is the idea that we're stuck helpless in a situation. And usually this theory refers to being like stuck in a negative situation. And we believe we have no control over the consequences. And so we think and we feel and we act helpless. But I think incorporating activities of mindfulness can be a way to overcome this idea on learned helplessness. And by reflecting on our situation and really being in the moment, we can escape the feeling of helplessness. I know, like, when I feel helpless, I try to take a step back and really like meditate, think about my situation. I meditate for like 10 minutes on whatever helpless situation I feel like I'm in, and that helps me gain control and realize how I can go about like solving the problem. And learned helplessness can cause depression, so finding ways to overcome it and realize you're strong enough to overcome it will increase our happiness.
For sure. And so then going forward, we did also an exercise with this in class on mindfulness and gratitude. How was that experience for you, and what did you take from it, if anything?
So prior to our discussion on meditation, I always found meditation really hard, because I have a really hard time focusing on one thing and my mind just wanders. But after the class on meditation, I realized that meditating is different for everyone. And so with some self-reflecting, I found that focusing on my breathing was not an activity that I found useful. However, meditating on things in my life and thinking about how big events or important situations help me think about how these affect me. And so I learned a lot about myself just from like thinking through and meditating on different topics rather than just focusing on breathing. And then in terms of gratitude, I have been keeping a gratitude journal since COVID, and I found that really increases my happiness. Thinking about like what I'm grateful for has just made me appreciate so many things in my life, from my friends and my family to like all the small things. And it's definitely helped me like build my relationships with people as well. Sometimes I definitely get wrapped up in people's lives on social media, and I think like, oh man, I wish I had their life, like the perfect life. But really recognizing everything that I'm grateful for has shown me that I'm like really have so much and I'm blessed with so much. And so I don't really need to care about like their perfect lives. Additionally, the gratitude journal has also helped me find good in hard times when normally I wouldn't necessarily see something good, but it's really brought my attention to it. And since I've been practicing this activity, I find it much easier now also to find the good in bad situations.
I definitely feel you on that in terms of like the media exhaustion. I definitely experienced a lot of that recently, and it gets like really actually exhausting. It's very tough to get through those situations. So I appreciate you shedding some light on that. Excuse me. All right, that was Caroline's presentation. And moving on to our third topic on CBT is Laura.
Yeah, hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about CBT and its impacts on positive change in well-being. So, as we discussed in class, thoughts, behaviors, and feelings are all interconnected and all heavily influence one's well-being. I think this concept is one that pertains to a lot of us as students because oftentimes a lot of us are stuck in a dysfunctional cycle in which negative thoughts can lead to unenthusiastic or harmful behaviors, which can further engender pessimistic, miserable emotions. The simple tendency to conceive dismissive, cynical thoughts, which can be seen commonly throughout college students, can lead to a downhill of well-being, as these thoughts, behaviors, and feelings are all linked. However, as mentioned before, us students are prone to these negative thoughts. With incessant assignments, exams, quizzes, on top of social commitments, students will most likely conceive anxiety-ridden thoughts such as, I'm going to fail this exam, or I'm so incompetent. As we've learned in class, these ways of thinking are what can be called thinking errors or thinking distortions. With thoughts that anticipate negative outcomes or condemn oneself with self-deprecating labels, students often fall into patterns that worsen their well-being. However, these thinking errors or harmful ways of thinking can be ameliorated with cognitive behavioral therapy or exercises involving this kind of treatment. This will then influence subsequent emotions and behaviors. So what is this kind of therapy? According to an article, this class of therapy is one that attempts to understand and tend to various psychiatric or emotional issues. They address specific problems and involve goals in order to encourage a better future within a limited amount of time. It involves interventions with the intent to modify unhealthy thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors, and seeks to improve one's well-being by helping regulate emotions and offer coping strategies as solutions to problems. This type of therapy can treat mood disorders such as bipolar disorder, depression, as well as anxiety disorders such as panic disorder or social phobia, but can also be undertaken by students, generally with exercises, in order to modify their way of thinking, in order to engender more positivity into their lives. According to an article by Hoffman, Sawyer, and Fang called The Empirical Status of the New Wave of CBT, we as students can partake in exercises involving this therapy in order to help us with emotion regulation, goal setting, and ability to make more adaptive appraisals of situations and events. With these practices, such as one repairing thinking distortions with a different, more affirmative way of thinking, students will be able to alter their pattern of negative thinking, behaving, and feeling to a more optimistic pattern, and ultimately improve their well-being. One way to do this is to participate in the 3 C's of CBT coined by Lukin Center for Psychotherapy. These 3 C's stand for catch, check, and change. You're going to first catch and identify the problematic or unhelpful thought that came up before your emotions, and next you're going to check or reflect on whether this thought is actually accurate, appropriate, or helpful to you. Finally, you're going to change this thought. You're going to change this thought from an unhelpful, distorted one to a more accurate, facilitative one. This will allow for you to be more mindful of your thoughts and keep track of it. One additional exercise that can supplement the previous one is keeping a thought diary, in which you can record and keep track of your thoughts and emotions throughout the day. Jot down impactful thoughts that you can find yourself having unconsciously, and write about how you felt due to this. You can also write about how you reacted or behaved in response to these thoughts and emotions. This simple exercise will further aid in being more conscious of thoughts and emotions and will help you identify any distortions that might be present in your way of thinking.
Thank you so much, Laura, for that incredibly informative presentation. Again, just a couple of questions for discussions. We'll talk about this further. One of the more significant cognitive behavioral techniques discussed in the article you referenced by Hoffman and his colleagues was that of goal setting. What is the importance of setting goals in the context of CBT to you, and how would one go about setting goals in a manner that is conducive to the research, especially like in the case of students?
So a large part of CBT involves addressing and recognizing this issue we as students are going through. So in order to mend these issues at all, they need to be brought to light and examined before anything. So I think this is where the importance of setting goals will come into play in the context of CBT, because goal setting will allow for the individual to focus on one problem to mend, and attain motivation, gain optimism and hope about the prospect of change, and will make solving the problem more achievable. So when setting these goals, it will be important to first identify and recognize the issue and objective. Second, break down the big goals into smaller, more attainable, manageable goals, perhaps in a step-by-step manner. And finally, keep track of them and their progress. This, all in all, will foster motivation and aid in solving a problem an individual is facing.
Perfect. Another question for discussion. A big problem that we see develop in college students, and I know I've struggled with this a lot, and I'm sure you all have in some form or another, is that of social phobia or social anxiety in many different situations. What does social anxiety mean to you, and how does cognitive restructuring and CBT play a role in the treatment or the lessening the impact of it?
So social anxiety is something that I've personally had a lot of trouble with, as I'm sure a lot of us college students have as well. And meeting people and engaging with a lot of new people is a large part of school in general. And once this issue has been identified, however, we can utilize cognitive restructuring, an essential element of CBT, in order to address and mend it. So cognitive restructuring will refocus the negative, unhelpful, unhealthy ways of thinking to a more rational, facilitative, and encouraging one, and will encourage those suffering from social anxiety to engage in more social environments and be more experimentative.
Thank you so much. Once again, we did a class exercise dealing with CBT. How was your experience with that, and what did you learn, if anything?
So honestly, I was surprised about how impactful this exercise involving CBT was, because at first I didn't think it would have much of an effect. But in my personal experience, I found myself prone to the thinking errors of anticipating negative outcomes when I was in a stressful situation, such as when I was studying for exams, and using should and must statements when I criticized myself for making a mistake. I think with this exercise, I set a goal to flip my way of thinking to a more encouraging, affirmative way, and found myself happier and in a better mood. And I think I was more enthusiastic to study more, learn more, and more uplifting when I was with friends. And I think I learned through this exercise how powerful CBT can be, and further how it can be utilized in diverse ways to treat other emotional difficulties I'm facing.
Thank you so much. So that's going to be all of our presentation for the evening. I personally think it's a very fun and informative conversation, and I think we're all trying to highlight here is that there's really no barrier to entry for wellness. Everyone has these tools at their disposal to implement positive psychology and use these techniques to generally improve their existence, make their lives a little bit better, even if it can't, fix everything. Did you guys have anything else you want to say, or are we good to wrap it up? All right. Well, thank you for listening. Thank you for participating. And yeah. All right.